Good afternoon, everyone. It's great to be here in my home city. Welcome to those of you who've travelled from overseas. I've got a London accent. For the last 6.5 years, I've been living in Dublin, in the Republic of Ireland. So you have an Englishman, an Irishman, and a Scotsman. It's not going to be a silly joke. What I'm going to hope to do is start a conversation which I think is really important, and that is a lot of you are representing cities, regions, and places, and start building the connections with the investors, with the developers, with the corporates who are the recipients of your brand strategies. And in their own way, these investors, developers, they have their own brand strategies for their projects. So Colliers International, we're a global top 3 real estate advisor, 500 offices, 60 countries, 15,000 people. We've been working in lots of your cities and regions. I was talking to Thebe just now. We're leading advice on a new city outside Johannesburg, Modderfontein. We're doing projects in China. We're doing projects in India. Lots in the UK, Ireland, Eastern Europe. It's a competitive world, so we're just trying to provide this advice to property, places, and destinations. Those are some of the projects we work on. I think the big theme emerging at the moment is the top left one, cities. The whole smart city. I think I've heard it mentioned once so far today. A lot of the other projects all happen in cities. I think 2010 was the year the global population became more urban than rural. That's a big market that us within Colliers are really starting to look at. You might know the Urban Land Institute, major global lobby group for real estate, has practitioners though from the law, architecture, finance, master planning. 5,000 people over in San Francisco about 3 or 4 weeks ago, and Colliers were leading on Colliers Does Cities. I've used the destination word a few times. It helps grab people's attention. We think it's a powerful proposition. What do we mean by a successful destination? We believe there's 5 factors. The attractor, which is going to draw people to the destination. The infrastructure, which makes it work well. The services that you provide that ensure you're competent and attract and retain more people. And then the management as well, which is very important. Central to that is having a brand, a clear idea of what you want to be. People have probably seen this before. We like it. We did a large piece of work for Cork, the second city in Ireland. And that got lots of silence in Cork because they knew other people in Ireland had lots of powerful views on Cork. We've done a big piece of work of trying to get a consistent message for the Cork region. At this point, the world is changing fast. Collaboration and competition is the order of the day. Millennials, Generation Y, the spoilt generation in many ways. I'm a has-been Generation X. You know, they want to be sold your city, the region. Why are you going to attract and retain talented people? Some of the projects we've worked on, or perhaps are just good at exemplifying this transition between a strong market position and value, pounds, euros, dollars. Canary Wharf, London, developed probably about 25 years ago now. It fulfilled a need to provide high-quality back-office space. The City of London was full up, planning wouldn't allow it. So it established itself as a great office destination. Now it's one of the best central business districts in the world and attracts premium rents and premium values. And it has a quoted developer who controls it and has a very tight rein on its brand. David will talk about Battersea Power Station here in London, one of the largest developments in Europe at the moment. It's the size of Mayfair. New West End Company. Back in about 2002, 2003, I did a lot of work advising on the setup of business improvement districts. I think they've been one of the most powerful vehicles for developing place branding over the last 10 years or so. They've been very successful across North America, here in the UK, and in many other countries. And I think there's lots of lessons there in terms of how you manage, organise, and brand a piece of city. My new home city, Dublin, Grand Canal Dock, Silicon Dock. It's home to Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, some of the leading global tech businesses. It's modern Dublin. I think it works very well. Another passion of mine, Cork, on the south coast of Ireland. We've looked at work there in the Docklands area and the wider region. Working with Malcolm Allen, some of you might have met earlier from Place Matters, we were tasked with what's the driving idea for Cork as a region to help drive coherent messaging and consistent messaging, help them elevate the conversations they have, not just domestically but internationally. Help them go out there and say, come to Cork, we're the EMEA home of Apple, EMC, Pfizer, and a range of other global businesses. The driving idea, the brand proposition we suggested is Cork has the right mix for your success. It's not a logo or strapline. That is just the state of mind we want Cork people to accept and work with. Paris was mentioned earlier on in a powerful presentation. Similar to Canary Wharf, it responded to a market need and is now perhaps the de facto central business district for Paris, attracting global companies paying premium rents for the Paris region. Piece of work we're doing in Glasgow at the moment. Very powerful government initiative across the UK. It's called City Deals. It's driving the economic growth of the core UK cities, so Manchester, Birmingham, Liverpool, Cardiff, and Glasgow. Central government giving lots of capital to local authorities to empower them more, to unlock land and property to help deliver the businesses and jobs and the wealth people have been talking about. For Renfrewshire, it's the land around Glasgow Airport. We said this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for you guys to rethink what you are, what your place brand is. They've absolutely loved it. They said it was the best piece of work on place they've ever encountered, where we managed to blend the place making, the place branding with the hard-nosed real estate piece. Great project. Got some friends from Fáilte Island, Ireland's national tourism agency here. Place Matters and Colliers International worked on this in 2012. We got the pleasure of driving from Donegal in the far north of Ireland down to Cork in the south. It's about 2,500 to 3,000 kilometres. It rained every day, but that didn't spoil the enjoyment too much. If you can do it, get over to the western seaboard of Ireland. It's fantastic. Tbilisi, Georgia, another city I'm passionate about. I was there for a week last year. We do a lot with the Colliers office there. I think it has every ingredient a European long weekender would look for from a experience. So we're having a conversation with the Tbilisi City Hall and the national government about how they can tell their story, again, more coherently for economic development and for the visitor economy. We took the Tbilisi City Hall and the national government to MIPIM, the world's leading real estate and city marketing conference, just to, if I can be bold, educate them a little bit about being more aware of what the competition is doing and just be visible themselves. The Bullring Birmingham, late 90s, early 2000s project helped to transform Birmingham, the second city of England, although Manchester is trying to change that. Unfortunately, our colleague from Hammerson, who were one of the developers, couldn't make this session. He had to pull out. But that's an example of how a major institutional developer has helped, in partnership with the City Council, transform a piece of city. We worked in Kuala Lumpur city centre for Petronas, advising on the attraction, the visitor experience going up the Twin Towers. But they wanted to know, is this piece of Kuala Lumpur still a competent destination? Is it able to compete with the new competition in Asia and in the Middle East? Just to draw this little presentation to a close. So we try getting involved in big urban development. There's normally a number of factors. The planning and infrastructure. Paris talked a lot about the planning and infrastructure. We're starting to have the conversation with the property and finance, and we're equally linking in with the understandings of markets and brands. I think there's a sweet spot in the middle that needs to be targeted. You can do one, but if you miss out one of the others, you might not have a great project. So the Colliers take on sort of place branding and market positioning work, why it's important. It's about trying to create a destination premium. You know, this early positioning work for a new project, do the detailed product development, get your creative brand story out there, and in the longer term, we believe you should grow your investment value and have a higher rate of return. Okay. I like this graphic here. So we've seen that presentation. Another one coming up, which Douglas will talk to shortly. I think we'll start off with this one. Like I said, every presentation is a sort of adopted Irishman these days. So I could just have the slide back up again, please. Douglas, he's an entrepreneur. He's an innovator in the better cities, smart cities field, but he's spent 25 years working in the FDI marketplace. Would you like just sort of why you think this advert, it's about 25 years old?
It's, thank you, Roger. A typical Scotsman saying great things about the Irish. To me, this is a work of art, and it's from the mid-1980s, so we're going way back. I'm probably showing my age. But when I first saw it, I just thought, yes, someone has actually really understood how to sell a place. Because there's a few locations in the mid-1980s trying to attract inward investment, but they very much talked about properties and sites and premises and all that kind of stuff. Very boring. But it was the Young Europeans campaign, which was very influential. Really was the first one that talked about what is important to businesses when they want to invest in location, the people. And this photo of, I think they're from University College Dublin, the engineering department, 20 of them. They're probably all captains of industry all around the world now. Really is the first of many. I mean, that photograph of university students just holding their degree is in every brochure. I've seen millions of brochures for millions of places all saying we've got a highly skilled, flexible workforce, but it all came from this photo. This is the first one. And this is a country that I feel that continues to understand how to sell a place. For me, place branding for companies, it's a useful thing for places to do because it helps the companies with their decision making. But good locations see it as a long-term process, and Ireland has stuck to a very sort of long-term view of what it is and what it can offer the world. And at its core, it's about its people. And it started that conversation in the mid-1980s, and it's still continuing it.
Thanks. Over to David Twigg from Battersea Power Station. So let's just bring it back to sort of core place branding. Your view of place branding, working in one of London's largest developments at the moment, how do you see place branding and what influence has it had on the development process at Battersea?
It's interesting because actually I think the last two presentations were quite interesting to look at because Britain is great and therefore that strategy can actually just be a campaign strategy. Whereas actually Africa is about agenda and action, and it's not just about telling a story that actually isn't existing on the ground. And for me, that's the sort of the single biggest point. And actually you kind of break it down, and I think maybe Simon Anholt was speaking yesterday, who I've spoken to on and off for about 10 years. And he breaks it down as something simply called symbolic action. And actually, it is about every action you take and every decision. It's not about the glitter and the stories and the adverts. And for us at Battersea, it has just been taking an existing brand, an existing image that people are all familiar with and actually love, and building on that. So there was, I think the advantage for us and the challenge for lots of developers, if you take it to a district level rather than a city level, is trying to figure out who they are and what they're about and their identity, and actually not just fall into the sort of homogenized solution that's happening all the way across the world, where you don't know a new development in New York from a new area in Dubai or Hong Kong. And we were given this gift of this building, although, don't get me wrong, it is a bloody pain to try and redevelop because it's a big beast, but it just created the identity, and you just work from there.
Douglas, your experience of looking at different cities and regions around the world, your take on place branding, its effectiveness, its appropriateness?
Yeah, definitely worth doing. Again, it makes this decision-making for companies a little bit easier, and it helps particular locations stand out. There is, I think, a lot of effort goes into fonts and logos and stuff like that. I don't think that's important for me. I make a decision and advise a client. I'm convinced by the people. It's the people and the story that they tell. So for me, place branding, I look at the team that are talking to me about a particular place, and they're the ones that I see as a brand. They might have nice letterheads or whatever, but that's pretty irrelevant. It's really, they've got to believe the story, and they've got to be enthusiastic, and they've got to convince me.
Thinking about the world of rankings and indices that are very much part of the place branding story, I think we did a piece of work last year, and there was over 150. How do you think they're important for a city, for a region to focus on?
Yes, rankings are quite useful because the location decision of a company is usually goes from a long list down to a short list, and for locations to get on the long list, they have to be in someone's head. So if you're known as one of the sort of better, higher ranking locations, then you're more likely to start in the process. So it's useful from that perspective, but there's so many now. There's a whole industry around ranking of places. And I think it's Jones Lang LaSalle did a report looking at all of them. And some of them are very useful, but they all come from their own individual approach. And you can't take them all as, as black and white. They've all got their own agenda. And some of them, when you delve deep into the numbers, they aren't actually that convincing. There's a lot of assumptions put in, et cetera, et cetera. So again, for a consultant advising companies, the rankings can be a bit of a distraction, but it can be useful at the same time. So there are certain things that you have to know about a location to make a decision whether you're going to invest there. And again, if these are in the rankings that you're looking at, then that's useful. But if there's a lot of other elements that are just made up and assumptions that are put into the rankings, then to me they're not that useful.
I think you actually, on that point, you have to bear in mind that those rankings don't necessarily mean that's a great place. Because, as you say, a lot of those rankings, they bring in affordability, they bring in congestion, because it's about, often used by companies looking to relocate staff and how you compensate them. And actually, a great city like London will be expensive and it will be congested, and therefore it sort of falls down those lists compared to the Zurichs that always score highly. So the two can't really be, as you say, aligned.
Yes.
Just coming back to the sort of Battersea experience, you're in a global city. Effectively, you've got a global product, you're marketing. Different approaches around the world for the domestic approach, Asia, Europe, North America?
Well, starting with Battersea, I mean, I moved to London specifically for this project. And I suppose London has always had, which I found strange, not a lot of mixed-use development. You've got the residential developers that do their thing on the river, and then you've got the big companies and the listed companies that do the office buildings, but actually people who create real mixed-use districts. And again, that's our brand. It's that first decision. It's not the magazines and all the crap that follows. It's that first decision that actually this should be a 24-hour-a-day mixed-use district. And you had this amazing building, so you could put offices in it with the old sort of large floor plates with exposed ceilings and exposed brick walls, and actually that would bring in the sort of creative office occupiers, the media companies, the TMTs, etc. And then from there you start to build a whole city around it. So you look at actually, that sort of demographic. They want independent cinema, they don't want a big multiplex, they want this kind of retail, they want sort of one-off independent food, and you build a sort of a city plan around that. And I think that was, or has been, sort of unusual in the UK. I think I've give credit to King's Cross. They're doing a similar sort of thing in the north of the city. But globally, I think you do see it a lot in Asia. But unfortunately, I think a lot of that sometimes is the sort of big podium development, the gated communities, the sort of the street culture that you get in London. We're urbanizing, 2 billion people in the next 25 years, and yet the stuff that we're building is, leaves a lot to be desired. You wonder actually what kind of, the impact on health and well-being if we continue to sort of homogenized, rack them, stack them, and build them out, and actually stop building cities with their own identity, which then will bring in investment.
Thinking about how you might benchmark or measure the success of Battersea? Clearly, there's just the financial, the rate on return on the investment. Have you done any analysis just to think about what your investment is doing so far, whether it's the PR mentions, the increase in, yes, sales prices and such like?
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm Irish, so we always tend to go by the gut. So, you know, it's kind of intuitive and it feels right, but yet I've got a board to report to. So, yeah, you do need to sort of back up on why you invest in culture and why you should go for a mixed-use scheme and why you create real places. But, you know, there is, I mean, like phase one, for example, we launched our first phase a year ago. It became the quickest selling scheme in the history of the country, launched in the UK to UK buyers. We didn't put one advert in any newspaper, and yet we sold 50 times quicker than the next nearest development. It's because people identified with the building. They saw the plan and said, actually, John, this is different, and this is a new community I want to buy into. But, you know, press, exactly, you know, you monitor all your media coverage. So last year we were the most covered development in any city, in any country in the world by column inches. And also then, now that we're in the market, and particularly talking to commercial tenants who maybe are a bit more savvy than maybe a residential purchaser, just because pure lack of supply, they are more interested. Companies want, you know, staff retention is the biggest challenge right now. And in London, for a company to find, you know, a real building with identity in a location that actually gives their staff a better quality of life, where people will keep on with the company, you know, we've had huge interest in the last sort of year since we launched our offices, and that is sort of the proof in the pudding. But, you know, you got to sort of believe it and sort of walk the line. There are certain measures, but it is a bit of gut at the end of the day as well.
You mentioned the office occupiers, the residential occupiers, and the leisure, the food and beverage ones. So, you know, you're clearly trying to, and I'm sure you will, deliver a great place to live, visit, and invest, a true sustainable community. It was interesting what you just mentioned about the office occupiers. They want to attract and retain the high-quality stuff. The leisure and the cultural, the food and beverage ones, how do they... What type of brands are you looking for there to attract to the Battersea scheme?
You've got to create surprise. I mean, phase one, you know, you've got all the guys knocking on the door, all the chains, the chain retailers, and it's like, you know, no, because actually, why would you get up off a couch in Islington and travel across London, go to Battersea Power Station, unless there was something different? So, you know, it's a one-off local guy who's opening this sort of retail store in phase one. There's independent restaurants, and our shareholders. The biggest challenge, I think, where a lot of development and a lot of cities and neighbourhoods fall down is the ownership strategy. If somebody's in it for the long term and they plan on managing that estate long term, you don't have to look at the buck day one. You know, you have to think about the balance. You actually see how you grow an estate, how you grow value, and the two go hand in hand. Whereas too many developers come in, they sell off plan, so actually, you know what, the places, their value is realised before they ever even build the thing. And therefore, you know what, there's not a lot of motivation for them to actually create something special. And I think that's another trick that people are missing, because actually if you put a bit of effort in, even if you created your value and you left a legacy, then you wouldn't build a brand for that place, you'd build a corporate brand. I mean, we all know we're obsessed with, you know, who builds our car and who our car manufacturer. We have no idea who builds our houses. You know, look how much money we spend on our homes, and yet the brand of the people who build the real estate we live in, we know nothing about. There's a huge opportunity for somebody to pull their act together and actually look at what they're doing and actually to create a legacy and to move ahead of the entire rest of the market.
Just the last question before we close to Douglas. In your new environment working smart cities with a Better Cities vehicle, how do you think sort of smart cities and being technology enabled can be used to help in the positioning and the branding of different places?
I think in the communication of the story, it's quite good. I mean, a lot of cities are now using dashboards, you know, with open data and putting open data and joining it all together. You're able to tell stories that are up to date and can be very fine-tuned and detailed. So I think open data is a big part of the smart city. And I think anybody that's promoting an area should be using data and dashboarding it, so there's a sort of real-time stream of data. Because again, a lot of information I've had in the past from locations has always been a bit out of date, but there's really no excuse for that. So the data aspect is huge, and also I think ICT technology can do so many great things for the actual physical environment as well. And if a location is very trying out new things, it's got a spirit of adventure. Again, that is of interest to some types of companies. So I think any location that calls itself a smart city, well, you know, everyone wants to be a smart city. It is a bit of a misused term now, but I think it's definitely worthwhile. There's some good stuff in there to have as part of your storytelling.
There's some questions which have just popped up, and I think we'll go through two just quickly before we go from amber to red. I think this has been done a lot in Battersea. The local engagement, community. Quick comment on that, please, David.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, we have such a sort of a great community around the park, around Battersea Park. I think we've had 250,000 people come to public consultations, and actually it's about engaging with that and actually being open to it. You got so many developers that put the small ad in the back of the paper because that's their planning requirement, and they open for, last week they opened in a pub across the road for 2 hours in the evening, at pretty much too early before anybody could get there after work. We open for 4 days, 12 hours a day. It is, you get good feedback. We're also lucky because people want Battersea to happen. Sometimes with creating new neighbourhoods or districts, it's like, well, you have to convince people and then take them on the journey. People want this to happen because it's been so long and so much legacy. And then if you're doing an honest job and you're creating a good place, then the community goes with you.
Okay, thank you very much. Hope you found that interesting. David, Douglas, thank you very much.